It's really easy to prep and run Daggerheart encounters in Owlbear Rodeo. Let's do that now. In this video we'll show you how to use our core features to get going fast with Daggerheart's official starter adventure, plus how to use optional extensions to replicate the feel of playing in person, and some power features for a fully streamlined approach. Owlbear Rodeo is a virtual tabletop designed to be intuitive and feature-rich. It works completely within a web browser, so you don't need to download any extra software. The app is also responsive, so it works across both mobile and desktop operating systems. Owlbear Rodeo's main focus is providing a great battle map experience. We also provide robust drawing, text and fog tools that make it easy to replicate a physical tabletop. We know that every table is different, so you can adapt Owlbear Rodeo for how you like to play, and you can add optional extensions for game-specific features. Let's take a look at how to get our encounters set up in the website, and then we'll consider the options that support different modes of play, from mostly physical, with only battle maps and tokens in Owlbear Rodeo, through to the options for a fully virtual session with integrated character sheets, dice rolling, and more. In order to follow along with this video, you'll need your own Owlbear Rodeo account, and you should also download the publicly available map, token, and artwork assets that are linked in this video's description. First, let's use the core features to get going fast. As the Game Master, you should create an account on our Play Free page using your email address. Once logged in, you can see your new profile page. Now create a new room to make a virtual space where you can gather your players together. You can use the dice buttons to roll for a randomized room name and a room background image. In your free account, you can create 2 persistent rooms, which can be used for different games, different player groups, or just have one shared session space and one private prep space. A scene is an infinite space for you to lay out maps, tokens, notes, and more, intended to represent a location where some kind of encounter might happen. You can create many scenes and quickly swap between them within your room as needed. To create your first scene, open the Asset Manager using its button on the right side of the dock. With the Scenes tab selected, create a scene by clicking on the Add button in the top right corner. Select the New tab and choose the map image for the Thieves encounter. In this case, the map has no grid lines as a scale guide, but it was made for a TV's 50-inch diagonal, so it's about 43 grid squares wide, and that's what I'll set its scale to be. For this scene, I'm also going to hide the grid, turn off grid snapping, and change the measurement method to ignore the grid too. And finally, let's name the scene and import it. Once the new scene is shown in the Asset Manager, you can click on its Open button to load it into your room. Next, let's switch to the Characters tab and open the Asset Manager once again. Click the Add button in the top right to add your character tokens. These are creature tokens that are made from the Starter Adventures art in the Token Stamp website, and I included their grid sizes in their file names so that they are auto-scaled correctly. This is true for any image that you import using the dimensions of grid cells like 43 by 25 or grid resolution like 100 dpi. Let's take a closer look at the asset dock. The dock at the bottom edge of the room provides access to all your images and is split into a tab for each image type: maps, props, mounts, characters, attachments, and notes, each of which corresponds to a different layer of the scene's canvas. Back in the scene, you can now drag and drop one of each of the Thistle folk tokens from your dock. And after multi-selecting them in the scene, you can hide them, so your players won't see where they're placed until you reveal them. Let's also drop our player tokens here, ready for placement later on. You can drag new assets into your scene from your device's storage and decide which layer they occupy. They'll be added to your dock and to your cloud storage too. If you want to add labels or reminders about any part of an encounter, you can use the freestanding text tool. And I'm hiding it from my players and locking it to prevent accidental movement. Or add a note asset from the starter sets. Dropping one into your scene and typing or pasting your message onto it. And editing the text appearance as you wish. For GM-only information, you can then hide these reminders from your players, as well as lock them and even change which layer they're in. We're now ready to invite your players to your room by simply sending them the URL. You can copy it from your browser or click the Invite Players button in the player list and then share that link. When a player opens this link, they can name themselves and ask to join your room. When you accept, you'll see them appear in the player list and they will see your scene. As this ambush commences, you could drop a piece of art into this scene to help visualise the thicket thieves emerging from the woods. Then delete that item as soon as you're ready to start using the battle map and tokens. At the start of this ambush, your players are encouraged to position their own characters, and by default they have permission to move any visible, unlocked tokens. So they'll see the scene and be able to place their own tokens where they think they should be. While they're doing that, you can label the adversary tokens and can duplicate them by Alt-click dragging on them. Next, you can move the Thistlefolk tokens into close range of the PCs and unhide them. Changes within the scene are saved to your account constantly in the background, both during session prep and while you play. The built-in toolsets on the right-hand toolbar affect how you interact with your current scene. As GM, you have more tools available than your players, whose access you can limit through the player list popover labelled Player Permissions. The Move tool allows you to click-drag any unlocked assets to move them around your scene. And if you click-drag on an empty area or a locked item, you will pan the whole scene around. To select a locked item, you can double-click or control-click on it. You can zoom in and out with a mouse wheel, or with the plus and minus buttons on a keyboard, or with a touchscreen's pinch gesture. To draw everyone's attention to the same place, use the Sync View feature to cause all their viewports to match yours. Then you can right-click and hold to bring up the laser pointer tool temporarily if needed. This is the same laser pointer tool as you find in the right-hand toolbar. The Contextual Toolbar under a selected asset shows the features available to the user. Note that only the GM can hide or unhide assets, but players have the other features if their permissions allow, like lock, duplicate, and delete. Each player has their own personal undo function, which they can use by clicking on the undo arrow in the right-hand toolsets bar or by pressing Ctrl-Z on their keyboard. Let's add our first extension called Ranges to our Owlbear Rodeo account through the Extensions Manager. This will allow us to measure distances using Daggerheart's Ranges concept. Once you've added Ranges, don't forget to enable it in this room. Now you'll find a new tool mode within the Measure toolset which is labelled Range and defaults to a preset called Dagger. While this tool is active, if you click and hold on a token, you can see its rangefinder rings centred on that position, labelled according to the distance they represent. You can also drag the token to move it while leaving the rangefinder locked to that token's starting position, making it trivially easy to determine movement options. Alternatively, if you click and hold away from any token, you'll be presented with a movable rangefinder, which you can drag around as long as your finger is pressed down, allowing you to check ranges at multiple different points on the map. When another player activates this tool, you'll see the dotted boundary lines and labels of their rangefinder, but not the coloured gradients, as these are only seen by the player who activated the tool. We've also included accessibility options for players with impaired colour vision, with a selection of colour themes that optimise the rangefinder's contrast. Finally, you can even create your own new range preset in the drop-down settings menu, for example to use the variant rules, adding your preferred labels, distances, and choosing how the range rings will be displayed. If you'd like to mark the battle map, then you can use the Drawing toolset, which provides a variety of shapes for points of interest or hazards, like the remnants of thorny bramble around the cart's wheel. When this encounter is finished, you can leave the scene on screen and draw your player's attention to another art drop that moves the story forwards, or you can close the scene and return to the backdrop image that you chose when you created this room. When you've got more than one scene prepared and are ready to switch to the next, you can simply drag it into your room from the Scenes tab on the dock, and it will load for you and for your players, replacing any scene that was in this room. If you haven't already got a copy of your PC tokens in this scene, you can drop them in from your asset dock. Dropping a folder of tokens will give you one copy of each token contained in it. Next, let's look at some extensions that help us replicate the feeling of playing in person. At this point, you're using Owlbear Rodeo just for maps and tokens, which is one of its core strengths and is all that some tables need, while everything else is still physical. However, if you're playing online and want to share the experiences of rolling dice and tracking each other's stats, you can integrate those parts of the game with our extensions. First, let's track our fear resource. I've already added this extension named Trackers, just like we added the Rangers extension earlier, so let's enable it in this room. The diamond-shaped icon in the top left corner shows the Trackers popover. Within the Dagger preset, let's pick the Fear tracker, which shows us 12 skulls for this resource. Click on the next unlit skull to add fear and to see and hear the animated transition. And when you spend fear, you can click on the highest lit skull to use it up. You can add or remove several skulls at once, and all your players will see those changes briefly in the corner of their screens, which will certainly build tension. Players can also use trackers for their own resources. All trackers are visible through that action popover, and each player can drag that out of the top left corner and to a different position on their screen, hiding or showing it at will. If there are extra resources that you want to track, you can add custom options with a name, a maximum and current value, and either a set of discrete icons or a fill bar. Next, let's add a simple dice extension so that everyone can share in the excitement of seeing live rolls as they land. I've already added this to my account, so let's just enable it in this room and we'll see a new D20 icon in the top left corner of the screen. Clicking on this produces a dice tray with a selection of 8 different dice styles available. Switching to one of my players now, let's have them choose the mixed option so they can pick 2 D12s of different colours as duality dice and roll them together with a modifier. That was a 15 with hope, so the relevant tracker can be increased. Once you've made any rolls, your own roll history shows your recent combos, and you can re-roll those directly. Whenever anyone makes a roll in their dice tray, everyone else gets to see the results too. However, if you ever need to hide any of your rolls from your players, you can use the Hide Roll button in the sidebar, so that when you make that roll, nothing is shown in the corner of the player's screens. Finally, to add some aesthetic variations in our scenes, let's go to the Extension Manager and enable the Weather extension. Weather effects can be applied to any item that's in the map layer, so let's select our locked map by holding Control and clicking on it, or double-clicking if a keyboard isn't available. And then we'll show the overflow menu by selecting the 3-dot button at the right-hand end of the Contextual Toolbar. At the foot of this menu, we'll select the option Add Weather. The weather parameters allow you to choose from 6 different effects and select the heading direction, the wind speed, and the density of the effect. Weather can also be used for localized effects within a drawn shape, so let's add something to indicate that the keystone ward is being refilled with magical energy. Switching to the drawing tools again, let's select the circle tool and draw over the crate, then select that shape and change its parameters so that it's locked, has a blue translucent fill and a blue translucent outline to match the location's aesthetic. Then move it to the map layer so that it can have an effect applied to it. Finally, we'll add weather, but let's leave it on the snow effect, changing the heading to north and increasing both the speed and the cover settings so that it looks like motes of magical energy are being directed into the keystone. And we're done. Finally, let's see what a fully virtual game might look like. If pencil and paper isn't your thing, or if your players keep losing their own pages, you might want to try a digital alternative for your character sheets. An easy win would be to upload the character sheet images and place them in their own scene, which can then be opened in your second Owlbear Rodeo room, with all your players also joining that virtual meeting space. Even if someone in your group only has one screen, a quick tab switch in their browser will flip between the 2 rooms that host the battle map and the character sheets. Each of the players can then track their own character stats using the text tool and the drawing tools to update their sheets as needed, and everything is being saved continuously in the background. There are a couple of advantages to this method. You can see all of your players' sheets in one place whenever you need to check their abilities, and you can help them to learn their own sheets by highlighting areas with the pointer tool, or with a drawn shape, as you discuss those sections with them. Likewise, the card loadout for each character could also be screen grabbed and placed in the scene for reference. If you intend to use this method long term, you could place the individual cards alongside the character sheet, as I've done here, allowing you to swap out each one easily in future whenever your players recall a different card from their vault. Having separate cards also allows them to rotate any limited use abilities to indicate that they've spent them. You could even duplicate that character sheet scene to give yourself a safety copy, protecting against anyone messing up any of those sheets or cards. At the start of the next session, all the character sheets will be in the same state as you left them, no more forgotten pages or missing cards. Fully digital character sheets are available in other websites, like Demiplane as shown here, and they offer a bespoke interface for you to track and update your character. If you're already using these, then for your convenience it's possible to link these third-party tools to your character tokens, using another extension called Sheet from Beyond. This was created by Alvaro, one of the talented developers in our community. When this extension has been added and enabled, there will be a new option in each token's overflow menu labelled Add Sheet. This will produce an entry field for its URL, and pasting the share link from that external website will associate it with that token, saving that link within your scene. Then, at the start of each session, you and any of your players can click on the View Sheet option, which brings up that external website in a new browser window for your reference. The final extension that we'll look at is called Game Master's Daggerheart, which provides a number of features that we've already seen in other extensions, but specifically combined to streamline running a Daggerheart game. This was created by Josh, another talented developer from our community. After you've enabled this extension in your room and opened the overflow menu on any token, you'll now see an Add to Grimoire option that creates stat tracking fields there, and it also adds that token into the extension's popover, showing up as a monster initially. A monster's stats are controlled by the GM and are automatically hidden from players, but that token can instead be defined as a player character, which transforms its stat fields to encompass all of the traits and resources available to a PC, from hit points through to a spotlight counter, plus traits and weapons. Once your players have joined your room, they can have their own token assigned to them, which will allow them to see and alter that character's stats in the action window and in that token's overflow menu. If you want to see your stats overlaid on your token, the folded map icon allows you to reveal them in the scene and not just in the action popover. This is true for both PC and GM controlled tokens, but you'll notice that the monster token's stats are always hidden from the players, as indicated by the semi-transparent token overlays on the GM's screen. In addition, the players only see the PC tokens in their own action popovers, whereas the GM sees all tokens that have been added to the grimoire. If you hover your mouse over the icons in the popover, you'll see tooltips that explain what they are, and their colour coding carries over into the token overlays themselves. Once your players have updated their stat blocks with their trait modifiers, they can make a duality roll by clicking on one of those modifiers in the extension's popover, or from their token's overflow menu, and the roll adds that modifier to its result. Any hope gained by the player or fear gained by the GM is also shown in those rolls and added automatically in the action popover to the appropriate counter. Players can also make reaction rolls that do not add hope or fear. If they've also added any weapons, they can roll damage dice from the action popover too. The annotated results of these rolls are shown for all players in a temporary popover in the lower right corner. And this detailed roll log can also be viewed by clicking on the scroll in the action popover. There are some quick roll buttons at the foot of the action popover, giving access to a generic pair of duality dice which also don't affect hope or fear counters, and another 6 user-definable dice presets. The stat counters that are regularly changed can be adjusted simply by right-clicking on the relevant icon to decrease its value or left-clicking to increase it. These numeric fields also support direct entry of their value. The 2 damage thresholds can be selected and changed in a similar way, and when you've compared the incoming damage to them, you can apply the appropriate hit point reduction simply by clicking directly on those numerals, the 3, the 2, or the 1. The Popovers question mark button produces a very good inline help page which has more details about this extension's features, but you can already see how GM's Daggerheart combines elements of the Dice and Trackers extensions and adds new features of its own. Now that our fully virtual game is set up, we can review how Owlbear Rodeo supports games that are primarily in person just by providing easy to use shared maps and tokens. Hybrid games that use extensions to build a shared experience for online play, and fully virtual games that have their character sheets, encounters, and dice rolling streamlined elegantly within your computer or handheld device, while keeping a familiar tabletop aesthetic. To learn more about Owlbear Rodeo, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or click another video to keep watching.